instead of reading our regularly scheduled spooky, eerie, creepy Reddit thread, we will be reading and exploring mysterious disappearances and their theories. Tonight's reading is brought to you by allthat'sinteresting.com. As always, before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And if you have your own Reddit type creepy story that you would like to share with me, make sure to email this email right here, which is also available down below. The story does not have to be your own, just let your girl know the details. Lastly, if you're loving the content and you're feeling generous, here is my tip jar information, which is also available in the description down below. Okay, anything is appreciated. Love y'all. Okay, that is enough for me. Let's get into this. The National Missing and Unidentified Persons System estimates that there are roughly 90,000 missing persons in the United States alone at any given time. While scientific advancement, such as genealogy tests, have solved many of these mysterious disappearances, many more remain unsolved, and likely will remain so. The first mysterious disappearance is the mysterious disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi in the Vatican. On a sweltering summer evening in June 1983, 15-year-old Emanuela Orlandi disappeared from the Vatican City in central Rome after attending a routine music lesson. The daughter of the prominent Vatican employee, Orlandi enjoyed the religious center's gardens and often ran into Pope John Paul II. Her brother, Pietro, recalled their city being more of a village, inhabited by a close-knit group of around 6 families. But Orlandi's disappearance on June 22nd of that year launched decades of kaleidoscope conspiracy theories that include the Italian mafia, Vatican Satanists, sex trafficking, and sacrifice. On the last day that anyone saw her, she had called her sister after a music class to tell her that a representative from Avon Cosmetics had offered her a job. When Orlandi failed to return home the following day, her parents called the teacher from her class and the police. Her mysterious disappearance was declared a missing persons case that day. A witness initially reported seeing a girl matching her description entering a green BMW near the music school on the night of her disappearance. But that bit of information would lead nowhere. Shortly after this maddening detail surfaced, the family received an ominous phone call promising the return of the girl if the Vatican released Mehmet Ali Agca, a Turkish national who was languishing in prison for having attempted to assassinate the Pope 2 years earlier. Unfortunately, that development proved fruitless as well. It has since been suggested that the Rome-based crime syndicate Banda della Magliana kidnapped Orlandi to force the Vatican to pay them back for an outstanding loan. The girlfriend of the leader of that criminal organization, Enrico de Pedez, later claimed that de Pedez told her that Orlandi was indeed kidnapped and killed. The most hair-raising theories, however, claim that the Vatican, local police, and the high-profile lawmakers kidnapped Orlandi and forced her into sexual servitude. At least, this is what the Vatican chief exorcist, Father Gabriel Amorth, believes. Amorth was appointed by Pope John Paul II himself. Quote, "This was a crime with a sexual motivation," Amorth insists. Parties were organized, with the Vatican gendarmerie acting as the recruiter of the girls. The network involved diplomatic personnel from a foreign embassy to the Holy See, Holy, I cannot read today. I believe Emanuela ended up as a victim of this circle. In 2019, a prominent promising tip suggested that Orlandi had been buried in a Vatican tomb. Tragically, this tip, too, yielded no results. Her family has organized demonstrations in recent years, hoping to spur a renewed investigation into her unsolved disappearance, but to no avail. The next case is the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history. Madeleine McCann. Madeleine McCann. Madeleine McCann. The mysterious disappearance of Madeleine McCann in 2007 continues to baffle investigators to this day. The British 3-year-old vanished while on vacation with her family in Portugal and is now considered the most heavily reported missing persons case in modern history, and for good reason. The story of McCann's mysterious disappearance began on the night of May 3rd, 2007, at a resort in Praia de Luz, Beach of Light in Portugal. Kate and Jerry McCann left Madeleine and her 2 twin siblings asleep in their rental apartment at the resort, which was on the ground floor. This is me being a Virgo and judging the parents. They then went to have dinner with friends at a nearby tapas restaurant. The adults returned 2 hours later at 10 p.m. to find their eldest child gone. Later, the McCanns remembered how their daughter had asked them over breakfast the morning of her disappearance, quote, "Why didn't you come when my brother and I cried last night?" unquote. The devastated parents were then led to believe that someone uninvited may have been in their apartment, and maybe even more than once. One of the first promising suspects in McCann's missing persons case was 33-year-old Robert Murat. The British-Portuguese real estate consultant not only lived nearby, but a man matching his description was seen around 9:15 p.m. on the night of McCann's disappearance, walking toward his home carrying a child, but the Portuguese police cleared him when they found no evidence of his involvement with the children. Next, the McCanns themselves were added to the list of suspects. Some investigators posited that Madeleine McCann actually died at the beach apartment, and that her parents fabricated this narrative of child abduction in order to cover it up. This theory seemed to hold some water, considering the fact that dogs that were brought on the scene seemed curiously alert inside the apartment and around the McCann family car. Alas, no body was ever found. The grieving parents were officially removed as suspects in 2008, and the missing persons case grew to become an unprecedented media phenomenon in the United Kingdom. Ever since a 2009 report that the region of Portugal in which McCann went missing was awash with pedophiles, many have posited that the toddler was abducted by local sex traffickers. There are 38 known sex offenders in the Algarve. The report went on, "The area is a magnet for pedophiles." In an ominous turn of events, former MP Sir Clement Froude, who had a home nearby and knew the McCanns, was later outed as a pedophile, from later claims that Hillary Clinton's campaign advisor John Podesta and his brother snatched the girls from their home, to theories that she simply walked off. missing, but everything else seemed normal. Footage was retrieved from her apartment complex surveillance system, which showed an unidentified person dropping off Kessie's car at noon on the day of her disappearance. Unfortunately, any distinguishing characteristics of theirs were obscured by the apartment's gate. Journalists covering the case reported the mysterious figure was thus the luckiest person of interest ever. In the following frustrating years, police have found Kessie's abandoned Chevy Malibu, but not much else. The car yielded a latent print, which was deemed too minuscule to reveal any helpful information. Additionally, none of the valuable items in Kessie's vehicle had been taken, which suggested that her unsolved disappearance wasn't instigated by a robbery. Authorities pivoted from a lack of evidence to the acquaintances and friends of Kessie's who might know more. Kessie's brother and boyfriend both investigated one of Kessie's ex-boyfriends on their own, but he was quickly ruled out. An older work colleague interested in Kessie was also cleared as a suspect. By this point, investigators had no more clues to follow. Kessie's credit cards went unused and her cell phone was turned off. Kessie, it seemed, had simply evaporated into thin air. It has now been many years since Kessie's disappearance. Imagine waking up and your daughter is nowhere to be found, said Orlando Police Detective Teresa. I can't pronounce her last name. You can't reach her. You can't locate her. The police can't locate her. Hours turn into panic and days into your worst nightmare. I can't imagine the nightmare the Kessie family has been sleepwalking through. The next case is the unsolved disappearance of Mara Murray, which has a documentary on Peacock that has been in my list for a very long time. If you have seen it, let me know what you think. If you haven't, I recommend it, even though I have not seen it. Shortly after 7 p.m. on the night of February 9th, 2004, the Grafton County Sheriff Department in New Hampshire began receiving reports of a car accident. The first call notified the police that a black Saturn had been wedged against a snowbank in Woodsville, New Hampshire. The second came from a local school bus driver named Butch Atwood, who said a young woman was inside the car still and appeared unharmed, but she was notably cold to touch. Atwood also said that the young woman had begged him not to call the police. He obliged her at first and then reported the incident once he got home. When the police finally arrived at the scene, the woman was nowhere to be seen, but they believed it was Mara Murray, a 21-year-old University of Massachusetts student who had recently gone missing, and indeed, they were able to confirm it was her car. Murray's mysterious disappearance initially seemed clear-cut. Murray likely got into a drunk driving accident, which could have then resulted in her death in a nearby wood area. But the case grew more sinister as the police continued to investigate it. The last person to see Murray alive, and well before Atwood, was her father, Fred. The two had dined together the night before the black Saturn was found in the snow. Fred recalled how the two of them had a perfectly normal meal. He then lent Murray his car so that she could drive back to campus in time for a party. Murray then crashed the car on her way home from the party at around 2:30 a.m. When Murray called her father to explain the incident, he assured her that she would need to report the crash to the DMV the next day, but there was nothing to worry about. When she finally got home that night, Fred recalled how his daughter seemed perfectly fine, but the next day, Murray disappeared. The morning of February 9th, Murray contacted her professors and told them that she was taking a week off due to a death in the family. She then packed up her dorm room and drove to an ATM in her own car and withdrew $280, went to the DMV, and then bought a large amount of alcohol. She called her own voicemail at 4:37 p.m. These were the last pieces of evidence regarding Murray's whereabouts and activities. When police found her car later relationship issues was then found in her cleared-out dorm room. Despite purported sightings of her in the years since, Murray has remained a missing person ever since. The next case is Tara Calico. Tara Calico. On September 20th, 1988, Tara Calico left her home in Valencia County, New Mexico for her daily bike ride. The 19-year-old was never seen by her loved ones in the flesh again, but her mother does believe that she surfaced in a Polaroid the following year, in which she's shown tied up. Investigators have been baffled ever since. As she headed out the door the morning of her disappearance, Calico jokingly told her mother, Patty Dowell, that she'd better come find her if she didn't get home by noon. The young woman had a dentist date with her boyfriend at 12:30 p.m. and told her mother that she was determined to be back by then. But when noon came and went, Calico's mother drove up and down her usual bike route to look for her, but to no avail. Her mother then contacted the police, but a subsequent search party yielded few clues. Pieces of Calico's Walkman and cassette tape were found on her route, but the police were convinced that these had been broken by Tara on purpose in order to lead police to her. Then her missing persons case went cold for the next 9 months. Authorities began to ask questions about Calico's parents and home life. They tried to find out if there were reasons for her mysterious disappearance, such as abuse. Police found nothing but 2 distressed parents who loved their daughter dearly and wanted nothing more than for her to be found safely. Quote, "There was so much she wanted to fit into a day," recalled her father John. "She was like a little machine. It was amazing." On June 15th, 1989, authorities found a Polaroid in a convenience store parking lot 1,500 miles away. It showed a teenage girl, starkly resembling Calico, and a young boy, both lying on sheets and a pillow, tied up with duct tape over their mouths. Calico's mother felt certain that this was her daughter. The girl in the photograph had the same scar on her thigh as Calico. While the FBI remained skeptical, experts at Scotland Yard in the UK agreed with her mother's assessment. Calico's mysterious disappearance took yet another distressing turn when the Henley family came forward to claim that the young boy in the photo was their son. Michael Henley's remains had been found in the Zuni Mountains in 1990. However, it's likely that he died from hypothermia after wandering away from his family's campsite. Sheriff Rene Rivera of Valencia County suggested a rational explanation for the missing persons case in 2008. He said he has received information that Calico was killed in a car accident while riding her bike after being hit. Rivera said that a teenage driver disposed of her body in fear. However, no arrests followed this claim, and Calico's parents moved to Florida in a desperate attempt to start anew. Tara Calico has never been found. The next case is the unsolved disappearance of pilot Frederick Valentich while mid-flight. Frederick Valentich was conducting a routine training flight over the Bass Strait between the Australian mainland and Tasmania on October 21st, 1978, when he mysteriously disappeared. The 20-year-old was an experienced pilot with around 150 hours of flying time under his belt and operating a light Cessna 18-2L when he vanished. Shortly after departing Moorabbin for King Island, Valentich radioed the Melbourne flight service with an astonishing report. There was an unidentified aircraft tailing him at 4,500 feet. He described its high speed and its 4 bright landing lights and said it had passed about 1,000 feet above him. Valentich even narrated the craft's movement for 5 minutes, positing that whomever was piloting the craft was toying with him. He said it was a shiny metallic vessel with a green light on it. Suddenly, Valentich experienced some harrowing engine troubles. When Melbourne flight flight service officials asked him one last time to describe the mysterious aircraft above him, he responded with some of the most ominous last words ever recorded. Quote, "It isn't an aircraft." The transmission was suddenly cut off. I have chills. The last thing Melbourne flight service officials heard was a metallic scraping sound. Authorities figured the pilot had crashed. However, a sea and air search yielded no sign of his plane. The missing persons case was rather quickly closed, but 5 years later, an engine cowl flap matching Valentich's plane washed ashore on Flinders Island in Australia. Things got stranger when the pilot's father revealed that his son had been an ardent believer in the UFOs and even actively worried about encountering one. In 2014, a UFO action group in Victoria claimed that an unidentified farmer saw a 90-foot craft hovering above his farm the morning he disappeared. The anonymous individual even stated that Valentich's missing plane was stuck to the side of this UFO. Unfortunately, the man's identity has yet to be revealed, and no further developments regarding his mysterious disappearance have sprung up ever since. Honestly, since the government has come out and straight up said aliens are real, which we know this fact, I would not be surprised if he got caught by aliens. Sad, nonetheless. The mysterious disappearance of 2 high school students and their mother. This missing persons case is particularly distressing as it saw the disappearance of 3 young women. On June 7th, 1992, 19-year-old Susie Streeter, her 47-year-old mother Cheryl Levitt, and her 18-year-old friend Stacy McCall all vanished from their Springfield, Missouri home. Just the day before, Streeter and McCall celebrated their high school graduation, and those celebratory events were the last times anyone reported seeing the 2 students and the mother anywhere in Webster County. I expected her home that night. The next day, maybe a couple days afterwards, recalled Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, in 2017. Never in my wildest imagination did I ever think that it would be 25 years later, and I would still be saying, Stacy is still missing. Though the Missouri State Highway Patrol, Springfield Police Department, and numerous other law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, conducted their own investigations, no promising leads into the missing persons case ever turned up. Even a 40-acre search across the county in 1993 yielded nothing. However, a 1996 prison interview with murderer Robert Craig Socks garnered some hope. Socks claimed to have been in Springfield that day the 3 women disappeared, but no charges were ever levied against him. Then a few years later, in 2002, 2 women called the police to say that there were men at a Webster County concrete company who seemed suspicious. A subsequent search of the site turned up human remains. The bones, however, proved far too old to belong to any of the 3 women. The next year, authorities found blood at a farm in Cassville, but once again, lab testing dashed any hope of providing answers to the mysterious disappearances. The nearly 3-decade-long mystery has yet to curb Stacy McCall's mother's determination to finding her daughter. Unfortunately, the Springfield Police Department has long abandoned the case of the Springfield 3. Until I know 100% that Stacy is deceased, I will never declare her dead, said Janice McCall. They're going to have to find some remains somewhere before I call her legally dead. It's not for any reason other than if I do and she's not dead, think of how mad she'd be when she got back. The next case is Branson Perry. Branson Perry disappeared from his father's Skidmore, Missouri home on April 11th, 2001. But the 20-year-old wasn't alone when it happened. His friend Jenna Crawford had visited to help him clean the house before Perry's father had returned home from a stay in the hospital. Crawford claimed that Perry walked outside and shouted up to her through the window that he was just returning some jumper cables to the shed by the house. 2 men, meanwhile, were working within eyesight on fixing his father's car. Despite these numerous developments. Branson Perry's disappearance remains one of the most maddening in most recent history. Perry was working with a traveling petting zoo at the time of his mysterious disappearance and suffered from, I feel like I'm mispronouncing a lot of words, but tachycardia, a condition that made his heart race. He was living at home with his father. On April 7th, a few days before he vanished, Perry visited his neighbor Jason Berman, who purportedly dosed him with an unidentifiable drug. According to true crime expert Diane Fanning, Perry then stripped naked and danced before shaving off his pubic hair and engaging in sexual activity with Berman. Once Perry sobered up, he became humiliated and told his father everything. The father became enraged with Berman, but no confrontation occurred, and Berman was never officially named as a suspect in Perry's unsolved disappearance. On the day he vanished, Jenna Crawford simply assumed that Perry had gone elsewhere and went home herself without another thought. Then, Perry's grandmother dropped by the following day to an empty home. Thinking Perry had stepped out, she returned the next day too, but to another empty home. She and Perry's parents filed a missing persons report on April 16th, 2001. All of Perry's belongings had been left behind, and foul play was suspected. In 2003, the missing persons case of Branson Perry took a bizarre turn when a Presbyterian minister and Boy Scouts leader named Jack Wayne Rogers was arrested for unrelated charges. After attempting to perform sex reassignment surgery on a trans woman and failing to stop the bleeding, Rogers was charged with first-degree assault and practicing medicine without a license. But when authorities searched his belongings, they discovered evidence of even more disturbing crimes on his computer, including child porn and distressing online posts that described the torture and murder of multiple men. Rogers even described cannibalizing the severed privates of some. One of his posts described killing a blonde hitchhiker and burying him in the Ozarks. The description matched Perry's, but Rogers maintained that these posts were simply fictional writing exercises. With a lack of direct evidence, Rogers was cleared as a suspect in Perry's missing persons case. In my heart, I don't believe this suspect is responsible, said Rebecca Kleinow, Perry's mother. As it stands, investigators are convinced Perry was murdered. Whether local drug gangs or a cannibalistic Boy Scouts leader were involved in this unsolved disappearance remains unclear, and Perry is considered a missing person to this day. The next case is the disappearance of the Jamison family. Shortly before the entire Jamison family vanished in 2009, the father, Bobby Dale Jamison, visited his pastor and claimed that their home was haunted. Days later, Jamison, his wife, Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, all disappeared from their Eufaula, Oklahoma home. It was October 8th, 2009 when the family was reported missing. The police found their pickup truck a few days later, but it only added to the mystery, as it was discovered in Latimer County 1 hour away, and contained the family's IDs, wallets, phones, and their pet dog, and $32,000 in cash. The Jamisons were both collecting disability checks at the time, leading the police to believe that they could only have acquired this much cash if they were involved with buying or selling drugs. Investigators thought that perhaps the Jamisons were killed in a drug deal gone wrong, but then wondered why they had brought their daughter and the dog along with them. Everything found in the car suggested that the Jamisons didn't think they'd be away from their vehicle for long. But the missing persons case went cold for years, until November 16th, 2013. 3 miles from where their truck had been found, hunters discovered the skeletal remains of 2 adults and 1 child. While forensic experts were confident that these belonged to the Jamison family, no cause of death could be determined from them. At this time, police renewed their quest to finally solve the case. Police recalled how Bobby Dale Jamison had told his pastor that 2 to 4 ghosts were living on his roof and hunting his family home. They then discovered some unsettling security footage of the house on the night of the family's unsolved disappearance. The video Some suspected instead that Bobby Dale, Jamison's father, had murdered the family. Jamison had recently filed a protective order against his father, which painted him as a, quote, very dangerous man who thinks he is above the law, unquote. Perhaps the most convincing theory, however, was that Jamison first killed his family before committing suicide. This theory was initially sparked by an angry 11-page letter Sherilyn had written to her husband prior to their disappearance. Ultimately, the Jamison family's unsolved disappearance remains a disturbing open case. The next and last case is the case of Amy Lynn Bradley. Amy Lynn Bradley. It was March 24th, 1998, when Amy Lynn Bradley's father saw her peacefully resting on the balcony of their cruise ship cabin. It was barely 5:30 a.m. and the young woman had spent much of her evening at the ship's nightclub. Her father decided to let her sleep. When he came back at 6 a.m., she was gone. The Bradley family had boarded the Caribbean Rhapsody of the Seas cruise 4 days earlier, bound for the Antilles. The first leg was rather uneventful, as they awaited docking. Eager to let loose, Bradley and her brother, Brad, partied at the ship's club the evening before. Brad Bradley claimed his sister stayed behind him to talk to one of the band members entertaining the crowd. Brad left at around 1 a.m. and never saw his sister again. After alerting the onboard authorities, the worried family finally received help to search the ship once they docked. Based on Brad's recollections, the family suspected the crew was involved. Not only had the ship officials refused to keep the ship at sea to prevent the young woman's potential kidnappers from escaping, but even refused to page Bradley over the PA system. Further compounding was the fact that Bradley was a trained lifeguard, which made an accidental fall into the ocean rather unlikely. In addition, Brad noted how the crew at the nightclub had given his sister special attention, which led to the family's fears that she had been trafficked into sexual slavery. Subsequent reports that she had been seen in Curacao pushed these concerns. In August 1998, someone claimed to have spotted a woman with the same exact tattoos. The following year, a Navy member visiting a local brothel claimed one of its prostitutes identified herself as Amy Lynn Bradley. According to him, she said she wasn't allowed to leave the brothel. Perhaps the most harrowing clue was a 2005 email the Bradley family received, which depicted a woman resembling their daughter lying on a bed in her underwear. While the investigation is ongoing, no leads have cropped up since. Like every other missing case,